Welcome to the Startup Grind.
And I also want to mention our sponsors. So Grand Circus graciously lets us come every month. Google for Entrepreneurs is also a sponsor. Gianna, I forgot to tell you that one. Bizdom, Coffee of Origin, Simply Social Media, and Ken Mitchell, our fabulous videographer. And so tonight, I'm really pleased to bring to you Bob Marsh from LevelEleven. We have a tradition in Startup Grind where we give a really big round of applause and stand up and welcome our speaker. So if you all could do that for me, that would be great. So welcome to Bob Marsh from LevelEleven. And so I'm just going to ask you some questions about how you got started and maybe give us a little bit of background.
Okay, sure, great. So yeah, thanks for coming down tonight. So my background, my career has always been in sales and sales management. That's really what I've done for my career, a little over 20 years. Prior to starting this, I was at another local technology company called ePrize, and I was there really from the very beginning all the way through about a year and a half ago when I started this. And there I always did sales and sales leadership. That's what I did. And at ePrize, we worked on working with major brands like Target, General Mills, Coca-Cola, et cetera, to help them motivate consumer behavior that they wanted to see, like sign up for our newsletter or visit our website or buy our product, whatever it might be. And anyway, so the company grew very rapidly. We got up to around 500 people. There's about 125 people on the sales team, and we actually didn't have any kind of CRM system, which is really insane, actually, like to get that big and not have any kind of systems to manage and measure what's going on. So I was charged with creating a sales process and implementing a CRM system in Salesforce.com, which is like the most well-known, most used kind of CRM out there. And what happened was shortly after we went live with it, I thought to myself, well, like now what do I do? Like I've got all this data. If you think of a salesperson, even the best people aren't closing deals all day long. Like they're spending 98% of their time on the behaviors and activities they hope are going to ultimately lead to sales. And when I was a manager, I realized like maybe I can help my team with this by using a CRM system, because how do we know like what should we be focused on? What's going to really make a difference? And as a salesperson, I always wondered, like, am I doing the things that are going to ultimately pay off in the long run? I can feel busy, but like, am I doing the right stuff? And so, with that, after we launched Salesforce, and I said, geez, I don't really have what I need. Like as a manager, how do I see we're getting meetings and all this stuff, but how do I figure out what's right and how do I redirect the team appropriately based on what they need them to do? And I thought, well, salespeople are competitive. I've now got all this data that's in here. What if we could build a software application that allows a manager to say, here's the behavior I want to focus on, take a new product to market, get more face-to-face meetings, whatever it might be, and create real-time visibility, collaboration, leaderboards around that behavior. And so the idea was essentially creating like a full-blown marketing campaign within the walls of your own company. So it's kind of up all over the place, and everyone's kind of centered around whatever the behavior is. So what happened, that was kind of the concept, and I just went to our CEO, I'm like, I got this idea, and I can't stop thinking about it. And he said, you know what, actually the timing's really good. Like, that's a good idea. We've got a couple engineers that are in between projects. You can use them for 3 months. Like, go have at it. Like, and what an amazing experience. Like, so I'm not like really the stereotypical startup story. I'm like, all right, I'm quitting my job, and I'm taking all my savings and mortgaging the house and putting everything at risk. I'm going to start a company. I was able to kind of start it within the confines of a business. I already had a job, I had other responsibilities, but it was based on something that I needed, like in my existing job. And so we spent 3 months building, like we're literally like locked into a conference room, build out a beta version of the product, launched it at a huge conference called Dreamforce. It's just like the biggest IT conference in the world. And we left there with like 300 leads and got all this feedback. I mean, it was just massive feedback. And the product really was like not much of anything, but it was enough. You hear about the minimum viable product idea. Like it was that at the most minimal basis you can possibly think of. But it was enough for people to say like either I like it, I want to buy it, or I see where you're headed, call me when you have a real product. But we knew we had something. So that's kind of how it all started, and eventually it turned itself into its own company.
So now you're out on your own. How do you feel that being a salesperson prepared you to be an entrepreneur and run your own business?
I think it helped a ton because I think there's often as I see like people that try to start their own companies or kind of get them going, that people often get very stuck in trying to create a beautiful, perfect product, but it doesn't mean anything if people aren't buying it or using it, and it just really doesn't matter. And so I felt like coming from the lens of a salesperson, I had some sense of what's enough. Like, what do I feel like I could sell? And that would be very different than what maybe an engineer would think is sellable. And I found that there's a huge gap between those two things. And so I think it helped in that regard because it allowed me to create something and even today, I still, oftentimes our engineer is building something, I'm like, I can sell this, I just need some screenshots. I can sell that. So, so that's, I think that's been a huge difference. Also just being customer focused. I mean, one of the hardest things that I think any company has when they're starting out is just how do you go find the customers? And if there's one thing that we have absolutely nailed, it's we've secured a lot of customers very fast. And the key is that all that does is it gives you feedback, it gives you credibility, which is this cycle that allows you to kind of keep going.
And what do you wish that you had known before you had embarked on this venture, this solo venture?
God, that's a really good question. I feel like I spend 90% of my day on things I've never done before, so it's dealing with just figuring things out as I go is kind of something that I guess I expected that, but.
Give us an example, what was your day like today?
So today, what did I do today? So today I worked a little bit on, we're looking to hire more engineers. So we kind of worked with our CTO talking about what can we do, how do we do it, should we outsource it, should we find people, should we wait? So we worked on that. I went and met with a company that could potentially help us do it. Then we brainstormed about it a little bit. So that was that. I worked a little bit on, with our sales team to uncover where are they kind of finding some obstacles, and I helped create a draft of here's something to send clients and to help them kind of get over this hump that maybe they get stuck with. So for us, a lot of times we'll talk to a VP of sales or VP of marketing. They're like, I love it, great idea, I want to do it. And then so you got to talk to our operations team, and then that's where it kind of stalls. And so we built the product in a way that's very, very simple to get up and running. But what I found is that when you go to when the head of sales or marketing goes to operations and says, I really want this, it's super easy to do. They're like, yeah, right. That's what everybody says. I hear that every day. It's really super easy. And next thing I know, I'm in a 4-week project that's a pain in the neck, or even worse. So anyway, so we feel yeah, but we really mean it. So how do you convey that? So I just wrote up a detailed documentation, work with our engineering team to kind of figure out what that is. So anyway, my point of that is that you really have to get into the weeds on things and really understand the product and the market and what customers want, what they're looking for. And sometimes it's just a matter of okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write every last word of this, and then hand it over to someone to put it on the website. So anyway, that's some examples of the stuff that I work on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the one thing that you've discovered that you wish you didn't have to do now, running your own company, that you could just hand off to somebody else?
For me, probably the finance side of things. I knew that was going to be my big kind of weakness going in, and I've known that for a long time. And it just takes a lot more effort than maybe I expected. And I have great resources to help me with it, but it's still a matter of really understanding all the moving parts of it. The fundraising thing, we've raised around $5 million, so that's gone pretty well. But I also, along the way, I've struggled sometimes to really understand all the moving parts of that, and I sometimes am in conversations I don't know what we're talking about, and that's really hard. And so I have to explain. Can you just really break it down? Pretend I'm an idiot because I am on this topic. And so anyway, that's kind of interesting to.
I do have to say, I think it's hard when it comes to the finance people. They use all the acronyms, the ROI and the EBIT, and that's hard when you're acclimating yourself to that.
Well, the thing is that when it's your company, you can't, and this took me a little while to get used to, is that I was so used to having a huge team of people in the company that I could turn to and rely on for help. And so there is no one else to turn to. If there's something that we need to do, I can delegate and work with my team to figure it out, but there's no one else I can kind of go to necessarily to figure. I got to figure that out on my own. And so that took a little while to kind of get used to. And so, you know, as an example in the finance, like when I'm talking to, say, an attorney and they're trying to explain something to me, and I'll just stop and be like, I have no idea what you just said. Like, you have to say it again. Like, and just to be comfortable saying that. Like, because historically I could just rely, well, I don't know, I'm sure our attorneys know what they're talking about, I'll let them do it. I'm just the sales guy, like, I'll just get out of it. Where, like, I can't do that. I have to say, like, I don't understand, you got to start over. And say it to me in a different way or something. And then, you know, that's good for them, because usually what I found is that people, they don't always realize that they're speaking in their own language, and sometimes, if anything, it doesn't make them feel frustrated. They're like thankful. They're like, you're right, I need to do a better job explaining this. So.
Okay. What's the one thing that you've discovered that you really enjoy doing as an entrepreneur now?
I love anything to do with the product. So, and I find that that's continued to be exciting to me. So just designing the product, like listening to customer feedback, and then designing like this, like really down into the nuances of what it should say and how it's presented, you know, that kind of thing. And so I really enjoy that, and then defining the roadmap and being able to kind of architect the roadmap and what we're going to work on. Like, you know, that's a great example of, like, when you work at a big company, you can say, I really wish the product did this, I really wish it did that. If it could just do this, I could sell more. And now I can actually do that. Like, I can say, great, you can go to our engineering team, build this. This is what we want. You know, or come up with an idea, then just say, let's go build that. You know, and like, then 2 months later we have it. Like, that's really exciting. And I love, so another thing that I don't know, maybe it surprised me a little bit. So with my background in sales, like, I love the hunt, right? Like, I love like chasing new business and finding it, and I was really successful at that. But now, you know, like, we've got a sales leader coming in, like, and rely on the sales team to go do that, and I have to like I have to remove myself from it. Because I think that a lot of, like, someone advised me to this, is that it's such a common thing with the CEO as the company grows. You hire a sales leader and someone runs a sales organization, is you have to stop doing what you have historically done and maybe you're good at, and spend all of your time on existing customers. And so that's just like a shift, and I actually love it. Like, so I spend my time going out and meeting with customers, as opposed to trying to help go close that next deal. Even though I like that, I got to stop doing it. And that's a surprise. I didn't really think about that one.
Okay. I feel like entrepreneurs and salespeople are very close in their characteristics and their spirit, because typically salespeople are very independent. You know, they're off on their own, they're on the road, they're doing these things. So do you feel like you were always meant to end up in this position? Do you have some entrepreneurial memories that are early on, or did you kind of end up here and you're just discovering that you really like it?
No, I knew that this is what I would do. Like, I always knew that someday I wanted to start my own thing. And again, like, not the stereotype, you know, so I've been working for 20 years, you know, so like I had kind of developed some experience there. So as a salesperson, but just having some experience, I mean, that really helped out. So yeah, so like, I think there are some commonalities between salespeople and entrepreneurs. You know, there is like, sometimes like salespeople don't always think through all the nuance and the details. Like, you need the right people who can kind of think through that, because that's going to be really important. It's yeah, I think there are some similarities there, like being flexible and knowing how to adapt and listen to customers and that kind of thing. So,
have you had a moment yet where you thought, this is it, I'm done, I'm going back to sales, I'm not going to do this company anymore?
Never.
No?
No, like, and like that maybe what I was thinking about is that I knew that I wanted to do this someday. It was just a matter of when, and I wanted to wait until financially I was in a good position. I had 3 little kids, you know, like I just wanted to feel like I could be maybe in a more sound spot, but also to feel like I have enough experience. I've seen enough things. I've been an executive at a company. I've seen the different moving parts where I feel like, okay, I could do this. I could figure out engineering. I could figure out a product roadmap. I could figure out marketing. And I certainly knew the sales side of it, but I knew just enough where I felt confident I could figure it out. But no, I've not, at least not yet, had any feeling of like, wow, this was a mistake. But you know, that's also, we've been very successful consistently, so that certainly helped. And
how do you feel that running your own business now has affected your relationships with your family and with your friends? And
it definitely has. I mean, so it's I mean, I don't have as much time. Like I don't have as much time for like friends, honestly. Like, that's been something that's been a little bit disappointing. Like, I just don't have time to do it right now. So I just have to kind of accept, like, this is just a time in my life, and that's just, I can't give the attention there, which sometimes bums me out, but like that's maybe just what it is. Family-wise, like, you know, I mean, I don't work like an obscene number of hours. It's a relatively reasonable, like, you know, morning, but the difference is like being in the office versus being home. But the difference is I'm obsessed about it 24 hours. So like, and that can kind of have an effect at home too. So like if I'm at home, like, yes, I'm there for dinner at night, but like what's going on in your head? Like, are you really paying attention? Are you really like in the moment? And that's something I've learned to get better at, which is actually probably a good life lesson to kind of go through. But that's been an adjustment, learning to do that, learning to kind of try to let go and really, you know, and be there and engage with my wife and my kids. That's been a little bit of a change. But I think, you know, overall, like, I think that it's making me a better person in the long run, learning how to do all these things. I enjoy that it inspires other people. You know, I enjoy kind of being part of the startup scene in the sense of, you know, even events like this, that I hope that maybe there's some little thing that I can help someone else do it, because we're in the early stages of Detroit. We're at this first wave of technology startups, and I'm thrilled to be part of it, but this is a long-term view. Like, eventually, like, this is going to work, and then there'll be the next wave that comes through, and my hope is that we can help encourage and keep that moving. It's just that we're trying to help create that initial momentum.
Right.
So that part of it I get excited about.
Yeah, according, like, to the things I've read, we're about 5 years into our cycle, and it's about 20 years to build up a strong community.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
So you have.
Yeah, I mean, I was just down in Indianapolis, which not people don't always think about. There's been some massive technology success stories down there, and they're probably 5 to 10 years ahead of us. So Angie's List is headquartered down there. ExactTarget's headquartered down there. Just bought by Salesforce in the last year for a couple $2 billion, and another company, Interactive Intelligence, like big technology, high growth company that's down. And there's several. It's just, and it's a good example of like. I'm sure a number of you didn't know that either, but like, I went down there, I'm like, my God, I can't believe it. There's so many companies. And now, as a result of all those successful exits, et cetera, like going public or acquisitions, it's created this wave of like investors and advisors and startups that are kind of coming behind it. So that's like the next kind of wave that will happen here. Like some of these early stage companies, and hopefully we're one of them, are successful. Just creates wealth, which then creates people who've had experience, and it kind of pours right back into the environment and keeps it going.
One of the things that I consistently hear from entrepreneurs here who are starting out is this lack of VC funding. Mm-hmm. So what would you tell them? I know what I think about it, but what would you tell people about that?
I mean, I think that's false. I don't think that that's true. There's some statistics that explain like the growth of venture capital in Michigan is actually one of the highest growth states in the country. So there's certainly less than there are on the coast, but there's also advantages to that. Like there's not as many options. Like, you know, so if you're trying to start up a company out west, like join the club. I mean, there's a lot of people that are doing that. Not to say there's not as many here, but I mean there's still a ratio of number of startups relative to VCs. So I guess I would just wonder, like in those scenarios, is it the lack of VCs or is it the lack of ability to have a real actual product that you can effectively convince a venture capitalist to invest in? And it could sometimes be that might be the reality of it.
Right. So now that you've taken this entrepreneurial journey, what advice would you have for people who are just starting out?
Probably two things. Like one is that minimum viable product thing, I think is like really, really crucial. So there's a book that talks a lot about it, Lean Startup. If you haven't read it, I'd encourage it. I'd actually never read it, and then I looked back and I'm like, wow, that's actually what we did. So shocking. So
I think Eric Ries is the author of that.
That's right.
If anybody's interested.
Yes, it's a wonderful book. It's very helpful and very specific about what to do. That was, I look back, like that was a big one. Like really creating a very minimal product. It's just enough to sell. The second thing is like you just got to go find some customers. Like we talked about this before. Like, you know, you've got to find a few. Like that's the only way this is ever going to work. And like to go to like connecting it back to the VC conversation. Like when you can go to a VC and say, I have a really cool idea. It's a lot different than I have a really cool idea. I've already sold it to 5 people. Like that's a completely different story. You could even have like a half-assed product, but like if people are buying it, even if they're not paying you very much, like that says something. It says that there's a market for what you want to do. And you have to like find customers at all costs, like figure out any way to do it. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be profitable. It doesn't mean you're charging what maybe the product is worth. You know, like my favorite thing early on is I would just be very candid with potential customers. Like, first of all, do not give it away. Like, I think if you don't have sales experience, there's a tendency to be like, well, I'll just I'll just give it away because that'll remove the obstacle. Well, like, price is probably the least important obstacle that you have. Like, it's a matter of, do you actually have a product that someone wants? Price is not the issue. So, but do not give it away. You have to have some value exchange. There's got to be some kind of exchange, no matter what it is. Like, I just set a price, and I would, and when we were at the point where I knew the customer wanted it, like, my favorite line was, all right, I'll just be honest with you. We just started this company. I am the worst negotiator right now. So just tell me what you want to pay for it, and I'll say yes. And like that, it just worked. I mean, because people could appreciate where you were, and like I just meant it. Because the purpose was not like I got to make money to hit payroll tomorrow. The purpose was like I just need money. There's got to be some exchange here, and like we're just in the early stages of what this product is going to be. So
I think it's interesting that you say that because a lot of entrepreneurs make that mistake. They think if I give it for free, then you'll come back and get it again. That you'll come buy it again, or you'll tell your friends about it.
Yeah, I just think that I mean that's just not understanding sales a little bit. I think that's an example of maybe where having experience in sales is helpful, because I think that people who haven't sold before, don't have experience like selling, they get very afraid of a discussion around cost and like giving money. Just like some people are uncomfortable negotiating to buy a car, or when they're negotiating to buy a home or whatever it might be. It's an uncomfortable thing if you haven't done it before. And so I think there's an assumption that that will be an obstacle when it's not. It's like it's your own obstacle that you're not comfortable with, and that you need to figure out how to overcome it. So, because in my opinion, like if someone isn't going to give you money for it, do they really want it, or do they just say yes because you convince them to take it for free? And like no matter what kind of check, what size of check they're writing, it's showing like, okay, this is worth something to me. Okay.
So what is some of the worst entrepreneurial advice you think you've received so far?
I think one, that's interesting. I mean, one thing that someone told me early on was when it comes to raising capital, like, you know, just be really careful and cautious on like when you raise capital, how much money you're giving away. And I was like really kind of maybe overly fixated on that, like worrying about how much you kind of give out. And it's important, like don't get me wrong, but I think it's easy to get, and it wasn't a mistake that I made, but like I think I got thrown off by it in the beginning. It was like being overly concerned about that, because I mean, you can fight for that extra 5–10% of the business that you want to keep, but like if you don't have a company, it doesn't really matter. You know, so in the beginning, you just need money, and like the market will dictate what you can get. So I think maybe like some early advice I got was to be overly concerned about that, like more than was necessary, and it just kind of I spun too many wheels on that topic. That was one of them.
Okay. So what would you be doing tonight if you weren't here?
I would be at home with my wife and kids. Yeah, that's easy.
Okay.
What time is it right now? It's probably like 8:30. Yeah, so we'd probably be
8:40.
all in our bed.
8:28.
Our baby would be asleep. We'd probably be watching the Tigers game or America's Got Talent or something like that. Getting ready to put the kids to bed. Yeah.
I think that's really hard for a lot of entrepreneurs who are starting out to really make that distinction about family time and you were saying that it's a struggle. Do you find yourself like reminding yourself, okay, now I'm at home, I need to really pay attention, these years are going to go by fast? Or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I sometimes need to, I've gotten better at it. But yeah, sometimes I need to remember that. And the thing is it's not just, it's two things. Like one is, I'm always constantly afraid that I'm going to look back on life and be like, God, I missed those times because I was so fixated on that business. But then it's the balance of also, yeah, but if we can really make it work, like that'll also be good for my kids. Like financially, they'll be proud of me. It'll help inspire them to want to do the same. Like that's a balance of those two things. So like I can't always be like, I'm going to be home every night, because then that might not be the right thing overall either. You know, sometimes I have to remind myself, but it's also a reminder that I will be happier and more productive and energized if I have time with my family and friends and like balancing all of that. Because if you're just constantly working all the time, it affects your ability to be productive. So, you know, it's just the same thing with like exercise and eating well and everything. You got to have that balance. Otherwise, your ego thinks like, aren't I great? I'm working 100 hours a week. But it's like, sorry, but my 40 hours is better than your 100. I can get more done, you know, so if you manage it correctly.
I think that's also a mistake that many entrepreneurs make, is that they think they have to be working all the time, especially, no offense to anybody, but I think like the younger entrepreneurs really get focused on that they have to pull these 24-hour shifts. Mm-hmm. So would that be a piece of advice that you'd give to them, is just balance a little more? Or? Yeah,
I think it's balanced, but it's also like, it's balanced, but it's maybe some forced constraint. So like, you know, if I know that like I want to be home like on a relatively regular basis for dinner, or like I'm going to work out in the morning no matter what, like whatever it might be, it kind of just forces this constraint around I only have so much time during the day, and maybe if I have a lot of work I might have to do it at night or something. But I think what that does is it forces prioritization. So I think what happens is like there's a giant, like I have a freaking massive list of things to do, and I use a little tool to kind of keep just all added to the list, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it's like it just is going to keep getting bigger and bigger. But the thing is like I have a place that I'm capturing it. But the key is like, how do you prioritize it? Because you will not get everything done. And so if you feel like you have to work all the time, you'll just keep trying to get everything done. But you'll probably won't necessarily be doing the most productive, highest value things. So, you know, again, I think it's probably harder maybe when you're younger, because you don't have that forced kind of thing of like, I want to be home with my family, I do things in the morning. Then it's probably harder because you just feel like there's an endless amount of time. Right. Where, again, it's that forced constraint on this small time period. I better make sure I'm doing the most productive things, or the most important things, because that's what's gonna make it. And I think that alone ends up making the difference.
Mm-hmm. So I know you're invested in this company in LevelEleven. What are some of the things that you do to cultivate a corporate culture there?
A couple things that we do. Like one is, you know, I'm very cautious on like hires that we make. Like just I think they'll be good cultural fits for the company, and some of that is a little bit by instinct and experience. So, you know, we definitely have people that are willing to kind of, you know, figure out how to get the job done kind of attitude. Not necessarily, again, like you know, I try to model, like that doesn't mean working 100 hours a week, so but that doesn't kind of necessarily mean that way. But those are a couple kind of characteristics that I think we look for. A couple others are, we're very metrics oriented. So we have very specific measurables for anybody in any department knows exactly what's expected of them. And so they have those metrics, and they're all like gunning for those metrics. And so that allows us to say, here's what you need to figure out, how to accomplish it, and then they have like the flexibility to kind of figure out how to get there. That doesn't mean like you just admonish them of any responsibility. It's just like, here's your goal, figure it out. There's also like get involved in coach and develop and try to help them get there, but it's a very metrics-oriented culture, which I think people like, because they just want to know what's expected of them, and am I doing the right things, or am I just busy? So that's another one. And the third one I would say is that anybody that comes in, like I generally have a conversation around like, why would you want to come work for an early stage company? Like, you should know, like eyes wide open, like this is risky, it might not work. You know, we might think you're great today, and we could change strategy next month, and like we don't need you anymore. Like, and not that we've done those things, but like, I want them to come in fully aware that that's what's possible. And one of the things that I've found consistently is, when I've asked people like, what if this doesn't work out? Like, I mean, that's a real possibility. Like, by the number, like I think this is going to be, you know, I know this is going to be successful business, and it already has been, but the odds are against us. Like mathematically, we will fail, but like just that's what the odds are. So like when people know, like odds are it's not going to work. Doesn't mean we will make it work, but like you know the math says it's not. So what are you going to do if this doesn't work? Like maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Like maybe this is just going to fall apart. And consistently people say, well, that's okay. Like, I'll just find something else. Like, I'm good. So to have that self-confidence that they're willing to kind of do that anyway, just that says something about their personality. And
so in light of the fact that you're starting up, what are some things that you do to compensate your employees other than money?
I mean, the culture is certainly part of it, so that making it a fun place to work. I try to celebrate our successes regularly, and kind of sometimes there's step back things. Like people didn't, we don't keep track, like our monthly revenue I'm like constantly obsessed about, but the way we track things, people, it sounds weird. They don't always know what exactly that is. But like when we hit critical thresholds, I'll tell them, hey, this just happened. Do you know what this means? Like most companies never get to this point. And so like celebrating those things to make them feel like, wow, I'm actually part of something that's special. So that's one thing. We also then kind of more traditionally, we'll do things like once a quarter we'll do a team get together of some sort. You know, it might be going bowling together. It could be just going to the bar, just to make sure we're doing something together. Last quarter, because we had a successful Q1, we got a suite at the Tigers game. We all went to the Tigers game together. So just a time to all be together and kind of step away. We also, on a quarterly basis, will do some kind of charitable event. Like we'll go to a local charity and contribute hours. Like Forgotten Harvest is one that we've done several times, and just all go there as a team. And just a reminder of giving back, especially being in Detroit. That's important.
Right. So, you said that your customers, of course, are the most important. What have you learned from your customers so far as you've been starting up and developing your product?
Mm-hmm. One is, so I talked about the minimum viable product thing. Like people are willing to put up with that. Like that's like I think sometimes the surprise is that people are willing to put up and pay for like buying something on what they hope it's going to become. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. Another thing is that that's your best source of ideas. So when you get out to customers, like I said, like I try to spend more of my time out in front of existing customers. How are you using it? What are you using it for? What would make it better? That drives the roadmap. So and sometimes someone isn't specifically saying, "I wish it did this," but you pick up in the conversation some common threads. And then that might feed my idea machine to kind of drive the roadmap a little bit. So like, that's probably the best thing that you kind of learn from customers. They'll tell you what's going on in their business. Like I found out recently that we've been selling to VPs of sales, and then as I started talking to more, someone told me this is a new investor said, I think that your solution is good for marketing. I'm like, I don't know, but like let me go look into this. Well, I went and found talking to customers like that's why a lot of them bought it, like for marketing reasons. Like, oh my God, like I had no idea. And so that's like pivoting us a little bit in terms of the positioning slightly, because like we got all these great case studies that I wasn't even aware of. And so you just got to be out there talking to people about it. Another one is like recently I was meeting with a prospective customer, and I asked them like, why did you buy our product? And they said, well, we want to look into this whole gamification trend. I'm like, well, why? And they said, well, Fitbit. We both got Fitbits. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so they said, yeah, we got a Fitbit. Are you guys familiar with Fitbit? Or like those feel? So like, yeah, we just got Fitbits to lose weight, and there's these two sales managers. And what we realized was that, it keeps track of our steps and active minutes and all this kind of stuff. And then like, then there's a competitive aspect to it. And one day they realized like, oh my gosh, we need to do this for our sales team. Like all those daily behaviors. And like if you think about losing weight, like what you're supposed to do, you just don't do it. Like that's the problem. And like salespeople do the same thing. They know what they're supposed to do, like make more calls, face-to-face meetings, whatever it might be. They just don't do it. And so where Fitbit has been really impactful for people is like it gives you awareness of what's going on. Like I know, like okay, how am I doing? Like okay, I got to walk a little bit more. So it just like you take a couple extra steps, and like that makes a difference. It all ends up adding up. So anyway, we're building that. Like we're building Fitbit for sales now, and like that idea wouldn't have been generated if without having been in front of a customer and having a few customers mention something that was similar to that. Mm-hmm. And that's feeding a roadmap. And I'm as excited about this as I was when we were starting the company. Like but that's what you find out from customers.
Okay. So is there anything that you find, because you've been making that shift from sales to entrepreneurship. So is there anything that you find that you do like on a daily basis to help you grow as an entrepreneur? Do you make a conscious effort, or do you feel like it's more intrinsic?
Yeah, I read a lot, like largely like industry trades and that kind of thing. So I make sure I'm educated there. Like every morning, I read the Wall Street Journal, see what's going on out there. I read TechCrunch every day just to keep a pulse on what's happening in the market. A lot of times I just scan through the headlines or whatever, but it gives me a sense of what's going on in the marketplace because I don't want to miss a trend. And like the Fitbit example I just gave is an example. Like I see that trend happening, and it kind of maintains my pulse on that. And then there's a couple former founders that like have blogs, and so I'm always reading their stuff just to give me ideas. And then I've gotten a lot more active on Quora. So there's a few people on there. You can kind of follow topics around startups and entrepreneurship, and that usually I just read the questions people ask. So those are all, and that's a daily ritual that I have. So that's just constantly picking up little things that way.
Is there anybody that you find is the most beneficial, that you really enjoy reading, like your go-to person every morning?
Yeah, there's a guy, his name's Jason Lemkin. He founded a company called EchoSign, which was sold to Adobe a few years ago. He's like one of the more prolific content generators. He just writes a ton. So he probably has more stuff out there than anybody else. There's a few others. There's David Skoke is another one. There's a blog called Both Sides of the Table, which is actually a pretty good one. So those are, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
So, and then my last question before I open it up to the audience is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to be what I'm doing right now. Like if I look back and answer that question, like I'm doing what I wanted to do. But if I fast forward a little bit, like what I really want to do is I want to build a great company, because I feel like this is just a step towards something else, which just kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Like I want to build a great company because I've always wanted to. I've always wanted to create something, and so we're doing that. But the bigger idea is, and I remind our team, like we're here to build a great company. Like our job is not to build Detroit. Our job is to build a great company. But we do into Detroit, it adds this whole causal layer to what we're doing. And so that's not why we do it, but that's a part of it. And what I really want to do is I want to build a great company. I want to openly teach everyone on the team like how to build a company, what it's like. I'm very open about everything, like financially and like fundraising wise, et cetera. Because my hope is I'm building a group of people that when that next wave comes through, like this will be the group of people that helps other people accomplish it too. So that's what I want to do for my team. And my hope is that I can make this successful, and then I can use my experience to help other people go do the same thing.
All right. Do we have any questions? Sure, Rodney.
Hi, I'm Rodney.
Hi, Rodney.
I work at a startup down on the river. I'm a developer.
Okay.
And we have an app, and we're talking about gamification and other distribution and marketing strategies, because it actually seems to really fit. But like I'm wondering, is it always added incentives to encourage the behaviors you want? Is there any place for disincentive or taxing behaviors you don't want? And then you also mentioned that you get good ideas from customers, and we find that we do too, but without having a critical mass or like some kind of survey out there, it's how do you evaluate beyond your instinct which ones are going to be profitable and well adopted?
In terms of the ideas from them, okay. So a few questions there. So like first that's okay. So like on the gamification or incentive side of it. So it's an interesting topic. So like we're definitely lumped into the category of like it's gamification. Although my personal feeling is that first of all, like I never heard that word when I started this, so it was never an intention to kind of go down that path. My personal opinion is that gamification isn't like a solution by itself. It's a characteristic of good software design. So we're about like how do you motivate human beings to do something that maybe they wouldn't do otherwise. But we're not doing that through anything new. We're doing it through collaboration and recognition and leaderboards, and I guess you can call that gamification, but to me that's just human beings and the way that they react. And so if you use gamification elements like leaderboards and badging, et cetera, that's just a good visual design. It's just good design. In terms of incentives, like we have found that you don't really need that much of an incentive, like in the actual value, like a gift card or whatever it might be, to motivate a behavior. A client of ours ran a program to motivate their sales team to go get more face-to-face meetings. And everyone knew like they are more impactful. Face-to-face is better, but they just couldn't get people to do it more often. They weren't going to pay more for it. They weren't going to spiff on it. They weren't going to pay you higher commission if you had a face-to-face. They just, how do you make it happen? And so they just did these leaderboards around it. They drove $6 million in incremental sales just from encouraging them to go get face-to-face meetings and showing them how they were doing relative to their peers and getting those face-to-face meetings. The grand prize was a $25 gift card. So like, it had nothing to do with that. It was just about how am I doing compared to my peers, because everyone always wonders. and having some direction on where should I focus my effort. When that 98% of the time, when I'm not selling, like where should I put my effort? And so we just kind of help direct that a little bit. So anyway, that goes into maybe the incentive side of it. The third part in terms of like, prioritizing feedback. So, I mean, you do, especially early, I mean, you do need to have like some level of your own instinct around what's the vision for your product or your business, like where do you want it to go? Like that's kind of, to me, the final lens that you put on top of it. But, to me, it's like physically talking to people, like tell me, not just a survey, it's physically talking to people that are using it and like watching their clicks, watching them, like understanding like why do you use this, what's your driver behind it. And then it was like having those direct one-on-one conversations. What I did last quarter that helped drive this quarter's roadmap was I took what I thought were the top like 10 to 15 ideas that I thought we would want to work on that we were hearing from customers. And I just like opened it up and I'm like, I set up 15, 20 different meetings with our top customers and said, okay, here's all the things that we're looking to build. What do you think of each? Give me a rating, 1 to 5. Greatest idea, stupidest idea you ever heard. And like just go through each one of them and they just rated it. And then I kind of ultimately added them all up. And I said, okay, that's one data input, what our customers say they want. Then I went to our sales team and I said, okay, here's what our customers say they want. What's going to help you sell more? Like it's one thing what our customers want, but they're not buying anymore. Like what do they want? What's going to help you sell more? Then that's another input point. Then I went to the engineering team and said, okay, what excites you? Like what do you want to build that you get fired up about? And then I put my own lens on it and be like, here's what I think we should do. And so you take all those input points, a lot of people kind of provided input and balance, but that was the ultimate. There's several different things that determine what we actually built. So it's, but it all starts with just talking to people.
Anyone else?
I was reading an article and basically in some states if you were to design an app or some type of infrastructure that under company hours, the company has claim to your concept. So you build this up under Salesforce. Do they have a stake in this organization? Mm-hmm. Pretty big stake.
So I had kind of designed this and built this when I was at ePrize, not Salesforce.
ePrize.
When I was at ePrize, yeah. So what happened was I built it there, and then and I didn't really get into the nuances of this, but what happened was that we got to a point where we said, okay, this shouldn't, because I had other responsibilities of the company, and said this shouldn't be a side project of Bob's like in the back corner. This should really be its own company. Like it's just not going to survive in here because it needs venture capital, it needs aggressive growth. And so we decided, we jointly decided, let's spin this out. So I wasn't doing this like in the back and no one knew about it. Like it was no, so that was, part of that like basically we put a wrapper around what's the intellectual property, what's the product, et cetera, put a value on it. And then we went and raised venture capital. And then basically what happened is we took the value that they put on it, then ePrize retained got an equity stake in the company that was equal to the value, whatever the value, a percentage of the value of the company. So they retained a part of it. We did build it kind of in connection with Salesforce.com. It's like the platform we built it on. And they actually did, they're an investor as well. That wasn't the crux of your question, but like they've actually invested in our company because they want to help see our growth and it helps their whole ecosystem, et cetera. Yeah.
So did you ever consider bootstrapping it? I mean, as a software solution, you were spinning out, so you needed some financing to actually build the solution. But did you think early on, like you mentioned you struggled a little bit with how much control they wanted to give up, and my venture capital is going to be a little bit like my new bosses.
Yep.
I mean, how do you feel about that? Do you think a company should try to bootstrap it if they can and get that minimum viable product and maintain control as long as possible, or is there an inflection point where you really almost have to do it?
Yeah, so there's a couple. Like one is, just purely financially, like you're best to bootstrap it.
Yeah.
But the question is, like, is that going to allow you to get the growth that you need fast enough? So that kind of goes in line with some of the the advice that I got that maybe slowed me down a little bit. Is that early on, because like someone would say, maybe you should consider bootstrapping this or raising just like a tiny little bit of money just to get a little bit more traction, because that could significantly increase the valuation. You could raise more. So, but what I did is I just like pulled out a spreadsheet. I'm like, all right, like what do I need, right? What are the absolute? I need an engineer. I need to spend a little money on marketing. I can probably sell it and market it myself. I can do the roadmap. So what's the very minimum that I need? because I need to get a kick-ass engineer. I can't like horse around with that. Like, so I added those things up. I'm like, all right, if I try to do this on my own, how far would I get? I'm like, okay, I'd get about 2 months.
Yeah.
That's not going to help me. And then, and I said, or whatever it was, 6 months, or whatever. I said, okay, that's as far as I'm going to be able to go. And this is where I think what kind of valuation I can drive out of that, or kind of difference I can make. And I said, I'm just going to waste too much time. Like, I'm going to end up giving up. I'm going to end up, giving up equity then. And when I kind of balance out like the money that I would personally need to put in to kind of keep it afloat there, then what I'd be giving up later, it wouldn't make that big of a difference. And I've eliminated a ton of risk. Because if I tried to bootstrap it, that would mean like I would probably get really raw on like what I would do and really kind of keep it minimal, which could affect my ability to grow this effectively. So I felt actually that's kind of what I meant by if I don't take the money or take little, I'm actually creating more risk. I'm better off taking more money, investing heavier, and giving more assurance that it's actually going to work in return for maybe giving up a little extra equity. Because in the end, like you'll never get something big, create something big if you can't create something little. And like you got to get some momentum to create something little to then ultimately create something. So like I just feel like in the end it's all going to work out. Like it's all, maybe I gave up more than I had to, but it's not going to really matter because like in the end, if I'm successful and the business is successful, like it'll end up working out just fine. So it's a tough one, but.
Overly onerous at this point.
And the what?
The ownership, the equity stake they have. You don't feel like it's hindered you in any way.
No, I don't. Yeah, and I don't. I mean, and I don't know if that's the case with everybody, but like it hasn't been for me. It's been nothing but helpful.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Sure.
So, what is your ultimate goal with your company? Are you looking to maybe take it public in the future, or do you want to kind of keep this company under your arms?
So, a piece of advice that someone gave me kind of early on that didn't mean as much then, but it does now, is that all you got to do is focus on building a great company. Like, just stay focused on that no matter what. And that's like, it seems so simple, but it's really important. And I say that because it's easy, like if you're focused on anything other than building a great company and servicing your customers, you start making decisions for the wrong reasons. And I've caught myself doing that a couple times where it's like, so anyway, that's the first thing. Personally, as an investor in the company, and I have investors, they expect a return. So the return is going to have to come from somewhere. It'll come from going public, it'll come from an acquisition, it'll come from a sale like in some other way. There's a number of different options. But like everyone expects a return at some point. So that's definitely the case. Where you got to be careful is making decisions to try to align yourself towards one of those. Like if I knew there was a company that like is an ideal like acquisition target for us, and I started guiding our roadmap towards that, I'm making decisions for the wrong reasons. If I focus on the customer and building a great company, those things will just start coming your way. Because really what people acquire or a company goes public is momentum on a certain category. So the ultimate goal is just build a great company and then the right things will happen from there. But as an investor, I want a return, just like everybody is. I mean, there's conversation, like stuff like that comes up like every once in a while, but like we're still really early and like we think we've had something great, so we're pretty focused on that. Yeah.
I was just curious, at what point Salesforce did they know that you were building a product and their infrastructure, and then at what point did they actually come in and invest?
So, I mean, they knew from the very beginning. And so they have a platform and they encourage people to build software on their platform. I mean, there's a couple thousand products that are built on the Salesforce platform, and they're just trying to grow that even more. So they provided the software to do that, like at no cost. Like, so we just pay them a % of revenue, and like we can use all their software, which is like the most robust, stable thing out there. So they very well knew about it, and really like what ended up driving their investment in the company was that I had reached out to someone that ran a certain part of their product, and I said, geez, I'm looking at our own product roadmap, and I just want to make sure that like I'm not going to be on a collision course with like the 800-pound gorilla. So I just said, hey, let me just tell you what we're thinking about building, but I want to make sure I'm not building something that's going to compete with you because I'm going to get my ass kicked. Like that's not going to work. And they said, actually, this is great because like we know about you and we wanted to learn more about you, and I think you could be a good partner, and And it kind of, then it ultimately led itself into we'd actually like to invest in the company. You know, so like it just kind of played itself out that way. I mean, it wasn't quite that simple, but like that was basically what happened.
Was there any fear when you kind of brought the idea to them that they might kind of make their own version of it, or?
No. I mean, sure, it could happen, but like if I hadn't brought that idea to them, I mean, then what? Like, I may have been building a competitive product. You know, I never would have gotten the investment from them, which has given us tremendous credibility and everything. So, you know, which is like, you know, a common point. Like, the worst advice, like, I never bought into this, so I can't say it's bad advice. Like, don't worry about telling everyone what you're doing, because it doesn't matter. It all comes down to execution. Like, just because you've got a great idea, like, I mean, anybody's got an idea. Like, I'll tell everyone exactly what we're building and where we're going, like the Fitbit thing. Like, I think that's a huge idea, and someone's going to do it. So I'm just like, I got to build it fast because someone else is going to do it. But like, even if they do it, they still have to execute on it. And I think we can out-execute anybody. So, or outsell them, or out-market them, or whatever. So like, in the end, it doesn't really matter.
I got a question as far as like IP patents and all that good stuff. Like, I'm assuming that there could be a company that does something not necessarily as good as your company, right? But similar, overlapping, you know, ideas. You know, has that been an issue, or like that's?
No, so well, a couple of things. Like, one is if there's not other people in your doing something similar to what you're doing, you have to question if maybe you're insane. Like, so like, to me, like, other players in the market is simply validation that what you're doing is important because other people see it too. Now, maybe your way that you're going to attack the market will be a little bit different, your product's a little bit different, or maybe you feel like you can out-execute them, or like even for the exact same thing. So generally, that's just, it's purely validation. It's a positive thing. Like, our product has gotten better because we have competitors. Our product has gotten better, and our pitch has gotten better because sometimes when people pick our competitor over us, we learn why, and then it affects like what we do. Now, which is also a careful thing, back to your question about like going to target and acquire. You also don't want to chase yourself after a competitor and start, again, now you're building your product roadmap to copy a competitor versus what the market's telling you. So like, so anyway, it's generally it's validation, and it ends up making everybody better, and the whole market gets bigger because then now everyone's doing it. Like, one of our competitors just raised a ton of money. So I was like, oh wow, is that a risk? I'm like, no, because they're going to spend a ton of money on marketing, which is just going to widen the category, and then no one's going to just buy the first guy. They're going to go look at what else is out there, and then we're going to kind of come along. So, and then patent-wise, like, I don't know how important that really is. Like, it's in today's world, there's so many patents that end up being meaningless. You know, so you know, I'm aware of patents that exist in our category, but yeah.
We've got a couple more.
Sure.
So your background is sales, and you said one of the most important things initially is to find customers. So what are some of your advices for finding
some similar
advices for finding your initial customers? What would you advise?
I mean, the first thing is like, you got to build your own kind of ideal customer profile, so what you think it would look like. So maybe who you're going to sell to, size the company, like that, and make up a short list. Like, just make up a list of, here's 100 companies that I think would be great targets for us. I mean, generally it's going to be hard to sell it into a huge enterprise. Sometimes you can be successful in doing that. And just be really disciplined about just going down that list, like working your network to kind of find how can you get your way in there. You know, the average, so the research says that you have to call a prospect like 7 times, like call, email, like again and again and again, before you're going to get them to respond. The average person only tries twice. So like, you have to be really persistent and like have a system for like doing that. So those are a couple things I think are really important. And then just your general attitude being like, just be honest. Like, I just started this company, here's our product, here's what we're doing, I'm looking for some early customers. Just be open on it, because that'll ultimately kind of come out in the wash. So, you know, just being honest.
Terry?
At one point you talked about raising $5 million. How was that adventure? How did you do that?
How did I do it? In what way? What do you mean?
Well, how did you, well, I guess what I learned from your discussion is you have some pretty impressive alliances and partners between Salesforce and ePrize. But you went out and raised some cash for your company. How did you embark on that? Now, maybe it's with their help, and that's a little bit different than
Kind of, a little, yeah, okay. So we've done that over multiple rounds. So like when we originally launched, we raised $1.5 million. That was just to get the company started. And we did that with, so Detroit Venture Partners is our lead investor, who's like right next door. Detroit Venture Partners is led by the founder of ePrize, who I worked with for many years when I was there. So there was a connection there, which made that really easy to start. If I didn't have that, then I would have found some angel investors that would probably put in a little bit less or whatever. And then later we did a $2 million round about a year later, and that's when Salesforce invested. And that was a matter of like just saying, hey, we want to put more fuel into this company because it's really working, and we need cash. So it was, again, Detroit Venture Partners invested. We added Salesforce and a few others. And then that gave us enough money to get through like this summer. But earlier this year, I mean, we were beating all of our numbers. Company's growing really fast, like 300% annually. It's kind of the rate that we're at. So like, all right, this is working. So let's not wait until later 2014 to raise money. Let's raise more money now so we can grow faster. And so we quickly went to our existing investors, and they all said, we'll put in more, we'll put in more. And then we found a couple other new investors, and they kind of came in too. And then all of a sudden there's more momentum, and then more people want to give you money. And then, so that's kind of how snapshot of how it worked anyway. Yeah.
All right, well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your evening with us. And if we could give Bob Marsh another round of applause, that'd be great.